It's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan radio panel, and a lot happening in sport around the place. I've got an unstable internet connection, so hopefully we'll get the show going. First topic for discussion, AFL preliminary finals. Judge, just going to throw immediately to you the hot seat. How have you seen the publicity for preliminary finals with the AFL and the AFLW?
Well, if you took it as a percentage of what's actually out there, Professor, in the media which I follow, which I must say is fairly traditional, pretty poor. We've previously noted that women's sport attracts about 7% of mainstream media, and that's about what we've seen, I think. So I know what you guys have seen. You might see different media than I do, but in the mainstream media, I would have thought fairly poor. Fairly random too, Professor. Like you'll get a big splash about a player or Daisy Pearce, and the AFL's it takes up space and it looks good for the newspapers, but then it disappears fairly quickly and it's subsumed by such irrelevancies now as the cricket one-day series against England, which apparently we're playing. So I would have thought fairly suboptimal, as they say, Professor.
John, I'm looking at the Herald Sun as we go to show, just to do to it. 2 pages on the preliminary finals in total. 1 page of Gary Ablett playing up in Northern Territory and doing the calf muscle in a game. A 2-page spread on the kids in the draft. So, comparison.
And Gelding, just on that, the Australian's got a 3/4 of a page on who Collingwood is going to pick in the draft. Now, it turns out they've got about number 16. So you have to say, in a draft where universally the opinion is it's a pretty weak draft. It's a weak draft. Not as good as last.
I used to joke when I moved from Sydney 15 years ago about the media here with the AFL fascination. You could read about what Nathan Buckley had for breakfast, but it's a shame that, and that's not a joke, I think they pictured him once in a cafe just after I moved. I thought I don't really need to see what coffee he has, but it's a shame that fanaticism doesn't extend to the women's game.
Oh, it's a belief that nothing about Collingwood is unprintable. They'll print, Nathan Buckley buying shoes, as you say, or anything, but their 16th draft choice. I mean, come on. Where's the talk about the Giants' number 1 pick? And where's the story about what they've frittered away in number 1 picks over the years? So, yeah, pretty ordinary, Professor.
John, what do you think when we've got women's finals, preliminary finals, and the CEO takes the opportunity to talk about the Tasmanian 19th licence? Rather, wouldn't you just say put that to bed for 2 weeks? As CEO, you've got the Hawthorn discrimination going on in the background.
Yep.
Wouldn't this be a time to highlight the women's finals and then come out with Tasmania after the grand final and then concentrate on the Hawthorn issue?
Well, if you ask me, Gil McLachlan does not see his legacy as being women's football. He's not that dishonest that he's going to take credit for it. That was always something which was going to happen if Mickey Mouse was the president of the AFL. And the Tasmanian thing is, I think, what he sees as being his legacy. He would like to be thought of as a person that got it over the line. So to me, no, it's not a surprise that on his farewell tour, which he's doing now, ticking boxes, he'd like to tick that box. We'll come back to that later, Professor, but I think that box is ticked in pencil, just like my vote yesterday.
I did want to say it is a shame because you compare it to the Rugby League. Andrew Abdo, who is the boss of the NRL, not Peter V'landys, when he talks about the women's game, and he's been there since the inception, he's genuinely emotional about it all. He's proud of it. And you can't fake that emotion. So it is a shame that doesn't extend to the boss of the AFL and the women's game.
And also, Paul, I think that that Gil McLachlan sees the women's game as AFL light. And I can tell you, the women don't see it that way. Now, I've said before, I'm not the greatest fan of the standard of the game. I've always thought it'll be a generation before the standard gets to a really good level. That's not the point. The point is that the women's game, to those who follow it, who love it, think it is a genuinely important product. The AFL hierarchy do not see it that way. They see it as an adjunct, a good bit of publicity for the AFL, but nothing more than that. They put it in the same category as the Pride round. It gives us a bit of profile to those who would otherwise not maybe follow us. But that's as simplistic as it gets. And I think I've always said this, that the women's game should get away from the AFL, because the more I see of it, the less I like the way the AFL treats the game.
So how about this question, panel?
Coutta?
Brisbane played Adelaide at Metricon on Friday night. The crowd, according to the AFLW website, was 2,553. Now, Metricon's a stadium used by the Gold Coast Suns. It's a seated capacity of around 20,000. So it's easy to lose 2,500 people in a stadium. It wasn't a good look. A preliminary final, I would have thought, would have got a greater crowd than that. Are we concerned that there's only 2,500 people going to an AFLW preliminary final?
Well, Coutta, you'd have a view about that, I suspect. So I certainly have. Coutta, what do you reckon?
I thought there was more than 2,500 there. It certainly looked like there was more than 2,500. They had sections, obviously, of the ground closed, so the spectators couldn't be in there, and the majority were in the other side. And it looked like, as I said, it looked like more than 2,500, and certainly the noise was quite loud. Should they be getting more people? At the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, I don't think crowd numbers are necessarily the only metric that we should be looking at this from. Obviously, the AFL doesn't either if they're holding a grand final at Springfield. That I think the capacity there is 8,000, is it? Well,
Yep.
We don't know because it's never been used before. And obviously they can't use the two grounds. Metricon, I think, is being used. Here you go, Judge. Is being used for a Guns N' Roses concert.
Okay.
So 2,500 people. I would have thought there was more than that. The actual standard of the game, I thought was a very high standard. Tough, contested, hard football. And I think the thing, Professor, is that Adelaide lost, at the start of the season had a defection with Aaron Phillips moving across to Port Adelaide for their inaugural season, and Adelaide have just come up short. So I think the standards improved. The teams are definitely improving. But getting back to the point about the crowds, as I said, I thought there's more than 2,500, but again, it's not the only metric that we should be judging the game on.
Did you watch yesterday's game that Melbourne played in, Coutta?
Yeah, I watched yesterday's game again. Played at the home of the Melbourne Demons, I believe. Professor, was that right? Played at
Icon Park.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. So AFL or Icon Park, Princess Park, Optus Oval, whatever it's called these days, is the home of AFLW. It also happens to be the home of the Carlton Football Club, and the optic of that particular venue, like how big is that training facility? And one end of the ground is like a vortex, isn't it? There's nothing there. There's like a big training facility, then there's office space, and like again another ground that you sort of think, well, is it a great venue for football?
Yeah. 5,500 people there, although I must admit, all crammed into one section of the ground. It looked good from a crowd perspective.
Oh, absolutely. The crowd did look good. Again, we're looking at the other side of the ground. This side of the ground has the old grandstand and corporate suites and some capacity or some seating. and obviously back in the day, Professor, the SFNL Interleague played a couple of matches there, and we're on the end of some absolute mother of hidings. But again, it's the ground. The ground is actually a fantastic surface. But again, I'm not sure it's made for fans or the spectators to be attending a game or a ground like that. So 5.5, again, it sounded pretty loud, Professor. And I think there was a lot of good feedback about the actual day and again, the way that the players and the clubs conducted themselves around fan engagement.
Professor, the AFL doesn't seem to know what to do with the AFLW in terms of its fixturing, what time of the year it's going to start, what time of the year it's going to finish. Does this suggest to you that maybe this time of the year is not the best time to have the season and to have the finals, given that they've gone with the 18-team replica of the AFL? As we know, Paul's League doesn't do that. Paul's League seems to be focusing on going with the demand. And I must say, I actually like that. It sort of makes a bit of sense. But I just wonder whether fixturing is now, it has to work itself out. They've had pre-season, they've had post-season. Maybe they'll actually have it during the season.
But Judge,
where it's going to go.
But Judge, why not at the start of the season announce that you're going to hold it at Marvel, no matter what, no matter who's playing, no matter the teams, just go. Our season grand final will be played at Marvel. We've locked it in, and we're not having these discussions a week out from the grand final. Simple.
My theory of life, Coutta, is we only want two things in life: certainty and consistency. We want to know where things are. So that's your date and it's your place. And consistency. Quit buggerising around with it, which they do. Well, they seem to be doing for the last few years. And so that's what's going to happen. It'll be consistent every year. The AFL, the last Saturday in September, it's been messed around with a little bit, but it's pretty much a fixture. We all know when it's going to be. So couldn't agree more.
Well, here's another question. If you are fixturing, why would you fixture the grand final at a venue that's 40 kilometres out of Brisbane? Because that's where the grand final is going to be.
I don't know the following for AFLW in Brisbane. It would appear, because we're so far away, it's another country. It would appear that it hasn't got a great following. And I just wonder whether that is actually an issue. If it is 2,000 to 3,000, it certainly hasn't got the bums on seats that the Victorian state's got and that I'd say the Paul's game's got.
Maybe it's the China experiment Mark II.
Well, yeah. China experiment.
What about though, Judge?
Didn't that go well?
They had three venues, I think it was, lined up because obviously Brisbane, being the top team, were going to host the grand final. And the other venue they had was Cairns.
Yep.
Like Cairns. They don't play a grand final in Cairns.
Well, it's in Brisbane. It's in Queensland.
I see the Geldings having heart palpitations there because of Carmichael Hunt still after the siren.
You call that greater Brisbane area, I'd say.
But like Cairns,
did Carmichael Hunt do anything else in football apart from kick that goal after the siren?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Don't think so.
But if they had played it in Cairns, wouldn't that have been a bigger kick in the teeth to the competition? So 20 Ks out of Brisbane, it's better than that. And again, it's going to be played on an oval. And you won't hear the clubs complaining. You will not hear the clubs complaining because that's not what they do. They actually promote the game and they will front up that this week they'll be all about the grand final. Whereas if it was on the other foot and it was AFL, could you imagine the uproar that would be happening right now about it?
Yep. Again, very, very much a poorer cousin, the AFLW. And it's not getting better, Professor.
All right. Brisbane's fourth grand final in 7 seasons. So they're certainly the form team going to the grand final. Coutta, I'll ask you, given you support one of the teams, what chance Melbourne?
Oh, if it's anything like the match earlier in the season, Professor, they will Melbourne will lose. But hopefully they've learned a little bit from that. One interesting thing out of yesterday was the injury to Taylor Harris. Now, I still can't believe Taylor Harris is not playing at Carlton and that she's at Melbourne. And our obviously fortune for that Professor. I'm not sure there's too many greater contested marks playing AFLW right at the moment. And if she's out, that's a huge loss for both the Demons, but also I think for the grand final and the spectacle that it will be. The issue that we've got with Brisbane is that they are just a contested, hard, straight line running. There's probably a bit of Brisbane Broncos about the way they play, Paul.
Yeah.
They tackle hard, chase, don't let the ball out of their area and play that forward pressure, synonymous with probably the men's game, Professor. So I hope Nick and his team have learnt from earlier in the season. The loss that we had, that was the only loss that the Demons had this year. And that we try and replicate what Brisbane do. And the game style that Melbourne plays is different to anything else that's in the competition at the moment.
That game destined to be played next Sunday at 2:40 p.m. Thoughts on the date, Coutta?
I think, Professor, I think it's clean air time is on, and he's one for the panel as well, is that the WBBL finals on Saturday. Did we know that?
No.
So the
I think there's
WBBL,
been more advertising about the start of the men's BBL than the women's grand final.
yeah. So the WBBL finals on the Saturday, and then you got the AFLW final on the Sunday. So a terrific weekend of women's elite sport, and I think you'll get two pretty good finals there, Professor. So I'm glad that they didn't clash, because honestly, the WBBL, that cricket, so the final there will be the Sydney Sixers, who have probably two of the greatest players that Australia's produced in Alyssa Healy and Elise Perry, plus a couple of the imports. So you get to see the best of both worlds, Professor.
All right, let's go to rugby league now, Paul. Before we get to the results for the Kangaroos and the Jillaroos, two questions I wanted to ask first. First, I thought I was seeing things. I've never seen a smaller in-goal area before. If you were sprinting to the line at Old Trafford, you had to be very adept to get the ball down before you crossed the dead ball line.
You'd want to have the anchors ready, and a few of the players in scoring went through whatever that material was before the advertising boards. I hope it wasn't too abrasive, because it might have been a bit painful in certain areas, if you know what I'm saying. But I don't think you could fit Malman Inga in that in-goal area. It was that small. So I've never seen anything smaller either, Professor. And I thought I was seeing things, but then they showed it side on. It was actually very lucky someone didn't get hurt, because you often get players going well past the back of the in-goal. And as I said, there was a small strip of whatever material it was, then straight into the bollards.
I think, Paul, we'll obviously talk about the game, but one of those players that we like seeing try celebrations and is known for it is Latrell Mitchell. Now, Latrell isn't the most agile sort of athlete, and when he scores, he's got a bit of room that he needs to run with. Yeah. And it was like a crash mat behind the goals.
Yeah, he likes a bit of room to get the goanna celebration out, but that he was going to have to do it in a cage if he size space if he was going to get any goanna. So we didn't see the goanna there. He did play a very good game, though, notwithstanding the physical constraints on his celebrations. And I will launch into it. He was very emotional after the game. You've got to understand these players have spent nearly 2 months. He's got 2 young kids, 2 months away from their families. Yes, they're getting paid, but they're doing it for the love of the country. And anyone who says that international rugby league is dead, you just have to see the nation of Samoa, all 200,000 people. I think they were all on the streets after they managed somehow to make that final through passion and spirit. On paper, they looked completely outclassed to England in the semi-final, but they beat England. And the dream would have been, I think, for the organisers in the home country to have an England and Australia final. But you've got to be proud about the Samoans and the fact that they made the grand final. It shows how important the game is to other countries apart from the obvious New Zealand, Australia and England. They had more men down than Saving Private Ryan, Samoa. So the fact that they came as close as they did, 30-10, to Australia, they had their hooker knocked out in a dubious incident before half-time. That caused Anthony Milford to have to move to hooker, and that blunted any chance they had in the game. Angus Crichton, who raised an elbow to the hooker who was injured, he's not a dirty player, but that was a dirty act, whether it was defensive or reflex. When you raise an elbow and the ball's dead and knock someone out, you're off. That's pretty simple, and I'm stunned that he stayed on the pitch. That was raised in the post-match conference, and the Samoan coach obviously thought he should have been sent from the field, as did I. Mal Meninga called that silly, which I thought was a strange expression from Mal, but he was very lucky to stay on. But Latrell Mitchell, superstar of the game. Josh Addo-Carr, Professor, you must be very excited about the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs are very keen on Herbie Farnworth, who's been very good for England. If you had him there with Matt Burton and also Reid Marnie at 9, that would be quite a team there for you, Professor. So it's just great to watch Addo-Carr. He's been the star of the World Cup. It's amazing that he hasn't been playing for New South Wales. That makes it all the more baffling why he wasn't selected. But he's certainly been fun to watch. And if you don't enjoy Josh Addo-Carr breaking through the line and sprinting off like the quickest athlete on the planet, then that's about as good as we've got in Rugby League Town.
Paul, who played on the inside of Josh Addo-Carr? Question without notice.
Possibly Latrell, I think, because Tedesco's at the back. Tedesco had one of his best games. He's been there twice before. Even played for Italy as a young player, James Tedesco, but he's declared his allegiance for Australia. He was superb in the game, really just match winner. And they just were too classy. But Samoa was valiant in defeat, and it really was good to see.
We talked about the possible send-off. I don't think they were ever going to send anyone off if Junior Paulo got off the charge of the tackle last week that he got brought up on. If that was a real tribunal, not a kangaroo court, how many weeks would he have got, Paul?
Yeah, he would have gone for quite a while. It may have been that there was a no send-off rule, so it wouldn't ruin the match. But the irony, of course, if he had been sent off Crichton, then it would have made it more competitive. So perhaps there was a rule, unwritten rule, to save the smaller teams if someone was a bit out of order, that they wouldn't be sent off. But I can't see what more Crichton would have had to have done. He knocked him out and he was off the game. So an elbow to the head when the ball's dead, I can't see how he stayed on. So that was baffling, as was another refereeing decision which cost Samoa a 40-20 early in the game when Tedesco's foot was on the line. So there's a couple of howlers there, and Samoan fans would be proud, but a bit baffled by those two incidents.
The interesting part, Paul, out of all of this, and we've talked about it at AFL level as well, and I think cricket is seeing it, is the use of technology. Now, we've talked about the NRL bunker on this show previously, that it's probably doesn't do its job efficiently enough. And I think you've got examples here where the actual bunker should be stepping in and making or assisting with those decisions. Now, touch judges, they're technically just there for people to run up and down the sideline and get fit. There's no other genuine purpose other than I actually don't know what they do except for maybe wave a flag here and there and wear their shorts above their neck.
Yeah.
Why can't we use the technology to assist them going forward?
Well, they used to be known for running in at any incident. Now, of course, there's a whisper in the ear from upstairs, but they should be more involved because the bunker is getting things incredibly wrong. I do have to say as well, just talking about crowds before, there was 70-odd thousand at the game. They played the women's match before, and that was fantastic. So an enormous crowd at Old Trafford for both games. I really liked that back-to-back. It's not piggybacking on the back of the men's game. I think that they're playing well together, and that was as passionate as you'll see on the women's side. The Australia's won 3 in a row now, all against New Zealand. New Zealand will be starting to feel a bit like New South Wales in the State of Origin when we lost 10 of 11 games. Just a brilliant match to watch. The 2 players we've talked about before, Jess Surgis, Isabel Kelly, both fantastic. The veteran halfback, Ali Briganshaw, won the medal with the best on ground. They'd only beaten New Zealand 10-8 in the group stages, so to win 54-4 shows the class rising to the occasion. But all of those players will be taking part in the women's competition, which is fantastic to see.
Paul, am I correct in saying that the players, male and female, all got paid the same amount to participate?
I can't answer that, but I wouldn't be surprised about that. They're trying to keep it egalitarian. As I said, on the men's side, compared to their incomes in clubland and the money they get, it's 2 months away from your families and loved ones. So it's a long tournament, and they earned every cent on both sides. So it was a really good tournament, and it shows for anyone that says it's not an international sport. Well, the countries that do participate, you wouldn't get Samoa more joyous about anything, I don't think, in their history. It's just amazing to see them all taking to the streets and loving that game. It shows the talent as well that's in the NRL from the Pacifica nations. And Tonga had a good tournament as well.
And Paul, doesn't that also reflect why the Prime Minister's 13 match that's played after the season is such an important, I suppose, a great thing for the game as well?
It is. I think that NRL's really getting it right with the exhibition matches, and they'd have to be happy the game of rugby league with the way these 2 tournaments have gone, with the men's and the women's side of things. It's really been a good tournament to watch, and so much passion on show.
It also means, Paul, that for the NRL women's competition, that with the chance of playing for your country, which is something you can't do in the AFLW, obviously, is surely going to be an incentive for a lot of top athletes, primarily, I imagine, in Queensland and New South Wales, to get on board.
Yeah, that's what's great, that these players we will be watching in the NRL women's tournament. When we watch the Soccer World Cup, they're in all different leagues they're playing in. So this is a World Cup where the players are centred in that women's competition, and that's really got a great prospects, the women's game, as they're growing in terms of areas that need it and want a team and will support a team. It's going to be a great NRL women's season next year as well.
I draw the parallel, Paul, across to the AFLW, and Professor, we can talk about the Irish girls that are playing for Melbourne, but also across most teams, play Gaelic and then come out and play in the AFLW, Paul. Now, I suspect we're going to see more overseas players, if possible, come out and play in the NRLW, which only does one thing. It increases the standard, and it probably means that we're going to see more teams, not more quickly, but done in a better manner than what we've seen previously.
Yeah. Paul, I've got a question as well. Dwayne Johnson worked out that Samoa's got a rugby league team.
Who did?
Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Oh, The Rock. Sorry, I didn't recognise him by his proper name there. So he has Samoan heritage. He fired the boys up. I don't think they can be disappointed. It really was just with their players out, with the luck that went against them. I think to make the final was just a fantastic effort, and they really gave it their best shot. So The Rock would have been proud of his motherland's performance in the tournament. So it's good that it's catching world's attention.
Yeah. One last thing before we turn off rugby league, Paul. I read a story where it said that the Kangaroos were rated 4th in the international rankings before the tournament. So I had a look. New Zealand and England, okay, let's put them ahead. Who else was ahead of the Kangaroos before the tournament?
It'd have to be Samoa, was it? Or Fiji?
I can't quite work out how they were 4th.
Probably like how the stewards do the reports, perhaps, on their ratings. But when you get horses finishing 20 lengths last. But no, I don't know how that was worked out. I guess you could only say that they don't play that often. And, Australia's lost some matches before, but I can't see where that's based on. Whether it's because that they're not playing as many internationals, but that's very strange rankings. They can be changed now.
Yeah.
So Paul, Samoa's population.
200,000.
200,000.
Yep.
I mean, it's less than half the size of Tasmania. Talking about punching above your weight, so to speak, with the Samoans. They're all big boys, but yeah.
And all the Aragos. No, they're just brilliant. They really are. They're just fantastic. That was great to see, and I really enjoyed it as much as I would have loved Australia-England final, as would the hosts. I think most of the crowd were going for Samoa. Had some very English-looking people there with Samoan jerseys on, but I think that's just an anti-Australian feel. It was good to see, though, that the Aussies just fantastic, and it really brought the best out of them. It wasn't an easy tournament for Australia by any means, but they showed their class in the end.
So they grinded out
I
of
was
it.
just going to say to Paul, out of the Samoan team, how many do actually play rugby league in Australia?
Oh, the
Is it
majority of that
majority
team.
or everyone?
Yeah, there's a few in England, but there was no one that I saw that they have a small tournament in Samoa, small competition. I think there's 8 teams, but I think 90%, if not more, of that team, particularly the starters, were all either based in England, that tournament, but the majority were in the NRL. And it was interesting with Jerome Luai was up against a lot of his Panthers colleagues, and he said there's no teammates tonight from Penrith. It is either brothers or enemies, which was a great line and one of the better lines of the World Cup. So he didn't have any torn allegiances by taking on his Penrith teammates. They were very proud. And you've got Joseph Suwali, who could have walked into Australian team. He was happy to play for Samoa. So you can see the pride they've got in their country. And it, as I said, reminds me when I was there when Aloisi got that penalty for Australia, and I walked through George Street in Sydney and the street was shut off. I've never seen that in my life. I lived in Sydney for 30 years. It's those sort of moments that have the ability to unite a country. And that's surely part of why we do this show. Is sports has that ability to bring a country together like nothing else.
All right, Paul, thanks for that. Judge, I wanted to come back to you. The AFL and Tasmania reach in principle agreement. That's the headline.
Yeah.
If you read a little bit further, the only thing they've agreed on are the commercial terms, nothing else. And so the AFL's agreed with the Tasmanian government about how much money the Tasmanian government will put in.
Yeah.
That's all they've agreed on.
It is the Clayton's agreement, Professor, the agreement you have, where nothing's really been agreed. This is nonsense. And I read that article and I thought, well, now let's see the newspapers actually critically examine this whole thing. We've got 18 clubs that they've said they'll only come into the league when they get a majority of AFL presidents. Well, so far they've got 6. It's not that this idea was sort of flagged a week ago and, they've been mulling over it. I mean, this thing's been going for a number of years. So you'd think there'd be some sort of idea about which presidents support it. I've just done the sums on the stadium, Professor, because the whole thing apparently is dependent on a stadium. Okay, the stadium, so far as we know, is going to cost $750 million. Well, that's nonsense. That's in the order of $750 million. It actually started as a throwaway line by a newspaper article, which thought that's what it would cost, and that's now become the standard. Well, even applying what they've talked about, the federal government is going to pay $250 million. Well, they're not, because they've actually agreed to pay for the Olympics. And as you know, the Minister of Sport is a nothing in federal government, so that can't be guaranteed. Tasmania said they'd pay half the cost. Let's assume that's $375 million. Well, that's $625 million. They're $125 million short on buying the stadium. Why don't they do what Sportsfan Radio suggested, I don't know, a couple of years ago, fix up, improve one of the stadia they already have in Launceston and Hobart, and do what Geelong did, and that's a pretty bloody good stadium. So there is no stadium. There's unlikely to be a stadium. There's no money, as in the money isn't there, and there's no support from the AFL presidents. Apart from that, Professor, they're right to go. Oh, by the way, and Gil McLaughlin, the only person who's even talked about this, is about to leave the AFL, and nobody knows who's going to be the successor. And it's going nowhere, as far as I see.
Judge, you mentioned Gil McLaughlin there. He can't leave.
He can't leave, Coutta. No. They are in serious trouble. There is no plan B.
But there's no. But what he's got on his plate at the moment, and we all laugh at our mate up north, Paul's close mate, Peter from Racing New South Wales. But
at the head of Rugby League.
No, he's not in charge of Rugby League. Paul said.
Anyway.
He's just behind the. So just don't look behind the curtain. That's how it's.
But aren't we? But everything that's going on in AFL at the moment, you can't possibly get a new CEO, appoint a new CEO, or even leave with what's happening at the moment. Now, we're talking about the Tasmanian expansion team, 19 teams. I did hear, Judge, and you might correct me, the plans for the stadium and the teams that will use the stadium, they will play A-League there, 8 games a year. They will play cricket there. They'll play, obviously, football. And all of these will share in the new stadium. Now, how are they going to... And, sorry, they'll also play rugby league there, Paul.
Yeah.
Now, how? And what teams are going to want to play in Tasmania, say rugby league, which it's a heartland for rugby league, isn't it, Paul?
Oh, they love it down there. More than an apple, more than a Cascade in the south and a Jamesburg in the north. There's rugby league. It's just Peter V'landys will get down there. He'll spruik it. He'll broadcast the teams under the maybe you get them running under the Tassie Devils side or something, or other, like a saddlecloth or something on the Tasmanian Devils. I did want to say though, good, you've got to be serious here though. If you wait for things to calm down in the world, particularly in sports, he'd never go, Gil. I mean, we've got through COVID. If you're waiting for a time when it's safe and serene, it's the same as rugby league is going well, but that would also be the worst time to leave and change things up. So I don't think waiting for the right time for Gil to leave is going to help anyone. There's always going to be the need for strong leadership in any sports.
Coutta, it reminds me, of the judge who said, reform is the last thing we need. Things are bad enough as it is. So that's what's going to happen with the AFL. They're going to say, change? God, we can't have change. That's why I think Andrew Dillon is going to get the gig. Not because he's, a superstar of lateral thought. It's because the AFL is hit scared that it's all going to go off the rails, and so get a safe pair of hands.
Well, we know that Benny Gale's certainly not going to get the job after what he did with the AFLW finals. So he's certainly not getting the job, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's my pick. But yeah, Professor, to answer your question, I think there's a few details yet to be filled out, like all of them.
I think it's a shame because there wouldn't be many parts of Australia, perhaps the Gold Coast, that are doing better than Tasmania. It's absolutely booming.
Yeah.
Produce is amazing. A lot of people going back there who are from there. It would be a great time to capture that growth market there. And it's a shame that the AFL hasn't got everything in order. But I'm not saying that the NRL would have done things different if it was a league state. But it is a shame because it's a great part of Australia and it's booming, and it would be perfect for a team.
Well, the Jack Jumpers, and I know we shouldn't compare sports and teams and the like, Professor, but the Jack Jumpers are actually doing a great job for the NBL and having a team in Tasmania. Now, they're playing at a stadium that was already there, I think. It was upgraded, selling out, and actually have a good team that sort of, I would think, would be commercially viable. Now, obviously, we're talking different dollars when it comes to the AFL. But wouldn't you actually start smaller and then build? Like, why the need to make a stadium that's going to now and maybe do what the Jack Jumpers have done or do as they've done down at Cardinia Park, which is gradually build it. And obviously that's got to do with elections as well and votes. But at the same time, that's gone from being a a sort of a boutique stadium now to being a 40,000 seat stadium at the back end of the next year.
Isn't the problem with all this? You've got the ground already where they play Test cricket down in Hobart, which is fine. But aren't they talking about looking at this mega stadium again with this modern thing? We've got to have a roof on, and I suppose some of those games you see in Tassie that attract very, very small crowds when North Melbourne play down there. I'm all for doing up the grounds that already exist and spending money on them and getting, say, a crowd of 25,000. That would be fantastic. However, everyone's got to have this. Presidents and CEOs of AFL have to have these corporate rooms where they can talk and say what a great job they're doing, and then put a roof on when it decides to snow down in Hobart.
Well, talking about roofs, why don't we just get the man that's talking about putting a lid on the MCG to do this for us? He's come up with all the ideas. He's got the concepts around how Tasmania could work. Let's just go with him.
Who's that? That's not Volandis trying to do that, is it? For State of Origin, putting a roof on for one game.
No, this is an ex-club president who's obviously bored stupid, and is at home with a tin hat on, probably with a whiteboard in the dungeon, coming up with ideas.
Shouldn't he be in the castle? The ideas man.
Well, I'll tell you. Well, he still hosts his show, of course, but fair dinkum. Like, what year, Judge, are we actually talking about with Tasmania? What year? So, what year would they even come in?
25.
If you go by the stadium and assume that's apparently, and we're told it's a line in the sand, Coutta. Well, we had that stadium expert on a few months ago, and it's years we're talking about before they even get to that infrastructure. By the way, this is the Australian Football League. Tasmania's been a part of Australia for quite a long time, and it's absolute nonsense that we've got Queensland in there, with great respect to Paul's game, but, Greater Western Sydney in there, and yet we don't have Tasmania. We don't have Northern Territory, which also love the game a fair bit. And all of these reasons why we can't get the league, it's just putting the whole thing further back in time. So, look, Coutta, 3 years maybe, best case scenario. It's certainly not going to be, I don't know, next year or so. It could be next year, but it won't be at least 3 or 4 years on best scenario.
I was going to say, with your reference to the Giants, I think they've had more picks of young talent than Leonardo DiCaprio. I had to get that one in. But let's hope Tasmania does better with the draft picks if they get in.
That was just a naked attempt to get in a stinger, Paul, because your levels have been a bit low today. In fact, Couta's catching up. I just want to mention that.
That's why I had to get in off the top rope and fire that one in.
All right, gentlemen, let's have a look at the Soccer World Cup, which wasn't making many headlines at all until the governing body, FIFA, under pressure from, I believe, the Qatar government, decided that beer would not be served in the stadiums or stadia.
I haven't seen an outcry like this since, remember VB cut their alcohol content 4.9 to 4.6. They were taking to the street in the utes. They were burning effigies, setting alight their flannels. It was all on. But I've got a friend of a friend who perhaps is a legal counsel involved in this stoush. There was pressure from the royal family and suddenly the hundreds of millions that had been paid to have the beers in the venue, no dice. It's turned into Salt Lake City in Utah. There's one block apparently in Salt Lake City where you're allowed to drink, and it's Party Central. And nowhere else. So that seems to be the royal family spoken, and those hundreds of millions might be the subject of a lawsuit to keep an eye on.
Well, yeah, go on, Coutta.
Professor, they may not be serving at the grounds, but I believe that there's plenty of alcohol being served at venues around Qatar. But I think you have to sell a kidney to be able to get some. The price isn't I don't think there's a happy hour over there, Paul.
And I'll tell you this, I love a beer, but I'm not going to risk 100 lashes for it. I'm not talking about the beer brand either. You get lashed for anything over there. So you'd be very brave ripping into a long neck of anything there with the police circling around. But I see, Coutta, your favourites, the Fanatics are there, and they're not overly impressed. They said it's not about getting drunk, it's about the socialising. Whether they'll be as effective with their songs and oi, 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 I mean, that never gets old in my corner. Whether that needs beer to fuel it, I don't know. But it is a shame the Fanatics are affected. I know you'll be troubled by that, Coutta.
Oh, I actually haven't slept since the announcement and seeing the Fanatics being interviewed over this. It's they're truly a great Australian institution, the Fanatics, and we really are lucky to have an organisation like them supporting our team. But Professor, I think for all fans, if they're bored or they just want to reflect on leadership, they might want to look at the presentation or the press conference this morning of the president of FIFA.
Infantini.
Oh, that was brilliant.
It's an hour of amazing TV that you just. Paul, what do you think?
I think he'd had the Budweisers that were going to be sold at the stadiums, and it's a full band as well. Even Sean O'Callaghan in a lanyard wouldn't get a beer, so it's a full band, even for everyone. So that was one of the most compelling. It was like watching a car crash. That he said today I'm disabled. Today I don't even want to launch. Today I'm gay. It reminded me of Bruce McAvaney when Gay Waterhouse won the Cox Plate. He looked at the camera and went, "It's a great day to be gay." For those who don't know, but no, it was quite a compelling car crash. It wasn't even an interview. It was just almost like my monologues on here.
Paulie, he went further, so that he covered those off, and he said, "I was bullied as a 12-year-old because I had red hair," and then he started pointing to his hand and had to get the interpreter next to him to actually, he wanted to say the word freckles.
No, he said he was bullied as a redhead with freckles, but I did like the finale when he said, "At least I don't have to be part of that Fanatics." But no, that didn't.
Tell you what, Infantine by name, Infantine by nature, one of his arguments about the all of this hoo-ha is about that the Qataris have, against gays and the rest of it. He said, well, what about Europe? They've had 3,000 years of history. They should be called up for. That is an infantile argument. It's the sort of thing you say as a 6-year-old on the playground. Well, well, maybe I did that, but your dad's an idiot. That sort of level of argument.
But he wanted to get the gold medal for sports washing off our man Greg Norman, but I still don't think he's got it. He's got the silver for sports washing and defending Qatar, but I still think Greg Norman's in the yellow jersey for the sports washing movement.
I did like the announcement, though, that Bud Zero would still be available in all stadiums.
Oh, party on.
Party on.
Party on.
Yeah. But Professor, the two things you want to do as a bloke at the soccer is drink beer and hug your mate. Well, you're going to be given 100 lashes for both of these things now, so be careful.
Professor,
I'm waiting for someone to let off a flare. I'm wondering how many years in jail they'll get for that. Probably have a hand cut off. You'd have to be brave over there to try anything, I think. So I think if you went there, it wasn't going to be too alcohol fueled, but I don't know whether they've told the Poms yet. It's just, obviously it wasn't thought through, but that is one of the more astounding defences of a decision that you'll see, that infantile, whatever his name is. But big news for Australia, the world's best player is out for France. So I don't know, Gelding, if our odds of beating France have come in from $10.
We've got $12, I think. We've got
well, there's a big move. They've climbed out of trees to back the Aussies. With the best player in the world out, Karim Benzema, out for France.
All right, Coutta, I did like Budweiser's tweet after the announcement by FIFA. Well, this is awkward. Given how many millions they've pumped into sponsorship of the event.
How does it happen 2 days out from the actual event? So what about all the beer that they would have shipped over there? Like, confiscated. It's currently sitting in a King's Palace somewhere.
Sitting on the dock.
I've just got this image, Coutta, of about 1,000 very angry English supporters with their jerseys just barricading or just smashing into wherever they got that beer and said, "We'll take that, thank you. That's ours."
Calm down, Pip. Take down, Pip.
I was going to say, Judge, don't the Poms love having shirts off? I don't think that would be acceptable either.
Yeah, I think that's
So
true.
We've got some real problems with flares.
Yeah.
No booze or no alcohol with anything over 0.0.
I'd be worried. I'd be more worried about the Poms not being able to drink than being able to drink. I think holding it back from them is going to be very worrying.
All right, gentlemen, let's look at the actual soccer. Australia, by the time we go to air next, will have played 2 games. The first against France in 2 days' time, and then against Tunisia in 6 days' time. Just quickly going around the panel, how many points will we have this time next Sunday after those 2 matches?
4.
3 for the Tunisia win and 1 for the draw against France.
Coutta?
We'll have that many parked behind the ball. You might see Mal Meninga out there. We'll have everyone behind the ball.
Paul, who's going to score our goals? Are we hoping for own goals?
0-0 draw. We'll have everyone back behind there. Graham Arnold
Tim
might be out
Cahill's
there
over there coaching him. Maybe he'll put a jumper on and run out.
You might see John Howard in a tracksuit behind the ball. There'll be that many Aussies behind the ball, and it'll be park the bus time.
I'm with Paul on that, Professor. I'll go 2 points. 2 draws.
2 draws?
2 draws. Oh, Tunisia. Okay.
Coutta?
I reckon we might get a draw. So 1 point, I suppose, we get for a draw, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, there goes your fanatics application.
Judge?
I think we can beat Tunisia. Not that I know. And France, I just read the paper today. They've got no idea who our players are. So they might take it a bit easy. They've got to rearrange the squad for this best player not being there. So we might get a draw out of that.
You know what's going to fire them up, though, before they run out to play? I'll show them that submarine contract. Off come the berets and out come the intense gazers, I reckon.
All right.
Wasn't that the first game, Paul? The president of France bringing up the submarine contract at the Bali conference.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. They've got to build a bridge and get over it, don't they?
Oh, yeah, nice submarine reference. Or plenty of water under the bridge for sub to fit. So.
What are your thoughts, Professor? We didn't hear from you, Professor.
You didn't hear from me?
Are you saying 6 points or?
I'm saying 0.
Oh,
We'll have lost both.
I've got a message from Mark Fiorenti. He's on the fence. He'll let us know.
Yeah.
All right, Gelding, let's have a look at some racing now. Just in steward's language, please explain this to me because I have a vested interest from yesterday's racing at Ballarat. What were the stewards talking about with respect to Elite Icon? Market expectations. What are market expectations in racing?
Well, Professor, as you will know from my email to everyone this morning, I'm still guessing. Market expectation. The thing starts second favourite, finishes 10 lengths behind the second last horse, over 16 lengths behind the winner, and they go up, perform below market expectations and accept that as a reason for a poor performance. So I would have thought market expectations, every time you put a market up, Professor, I would expect every favourite to win if it's on market expectations. So why would you, I don't know, why would you use that as an excuse? I can't explain things that are unexplainable, Professor.
Well, I looked at the race, Gelding. When I was watching it live, I thought the horse had almost broken down or was injured in some way, which from the steward's report, that doesn't appear to be the case. So I'm trying to, what's the explanation for the horse finishing where it did? There is none.
Well, the jockey stopped riding it, Professor. So you, as you rightly point out, you expect to find some problem with the horse. So, you know, whether They vet tested it afterwards. I'm not sure. It seems they could find no abnormalities with the horse after the race. You don't finish 10 lengths behind the second last horse unless there's something wrong, Professor. And for a jockey just to say, "Oh, it didn't perform as well as we thought it would," and say, "Yeah, okay, that's okay, we'll tick that one off." Very, very strange, Professor. As I said, we may have another candidate for Rookie of the Week next week in the Ballarat Stewards. So very, very hard to follow when you can just sign off on that.
And the rider of Detonator Jack managed to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory.
I'm just wondering, again, the same jockey, John Allen, did he stop riding it when it hit the front just before the line, Professor, and then looked over to his right and saw green fly out of the corner of his eye coming and start riding? Because I thought Detonator Jack was home and hose and certainly didn't perform up to, well, I thought it performed up to our market expectations and had the race won until the very end. In fact, the jockey probably should have been out where green fly was on the better part of the going in the last race, Professor.
Gelding, can I ask you a question? And this might sound naive, but track downgrades and scratchings, are horses scratched because it's dangerous or they've got no chance of winning?
No. If it's dangerous, normally the race meeting's called off. And things like that, if there's any danger to jockeys or horses, that's why with lightning and rain, you'll see they'll stop for half an hour until lightning passes. That actually went Mark Johnson, an apprentice to Bruce Purcell, where we've had a horse. He was a jockey that was hit by lightning during a race and passed away. So that was why that was changed. With the downgrade, of course, some trainers, as we know, David, have opinions on their horses performing on good tracks, slow tracks and heavy tracks. And I need to go no further than my trainer when we talk about that. But they make a decision. They say, well, we had this horse entered for this race because it was a good 4 track. Now with the rain, it's a slow 7. We don't think it'll perform as well, so we'd like to scratch it to save it for another day.
And obviously that also, if it was to run and perform below market expectations, it would then affect its rating as well going forward.
Yeah, certainly.
All right. Well, Gelding, before we get to your tips for Swan Hill today, congratulations on your horse Drop the Mic running second at Murtoa yesterday in the Murtoa Cup.
The Tatura Cup, Professor.
Oh, sorry, the Tatura Cup. Sorry.
Yes, we were beaten for second. The horse did quite well, actually. So, an open class race. Ran third in the race last year, second this year, Professor. So
we'll win it next year.
Get on the early markets for the Tatura Cup next year, I would imagine.
Gelding, we just don't need the winner to run again because it'll be going for a hat trick of.
Yes, it beat us last year by just over a length, but it beat us quite comfortably yesterday. Terrible.
Now, Gelding, I did note there was from Racing Victoria, there was a tweet about the jockey riding a kilo over.
Yes, Lewis German. We were aware of it after we nominated. My astute trainer advised us that she wanted to keep Lewis German on board, who is an apprentice, who cannot ride under 55 kilos. We had 54 yesterday. She approached the stewards and gained permission for Lewis German to ride the horse overweight. A strange move normally, but it's quite a common event. Normally you'll find the stewards will give them a leadway of half a kilo normally, with the weight so low. And our trainer thought that Lewis has ridden the horse before. He was going to Tatura, so it was better to have him aboard 1 kilo over than, say, get another new jockey for the horse. But yeah, interesting move. But yeah, that was the story behind that. I was quite happy with the ride. I think he rode it quite well, gave the horse every chance. We were just beaten by a better horse on the day.
Gelding, I'm surprised by that. They've done, as you know, scientific tests on the decrease in speed compared to the increase in weight. And when horse races finish as close as they do, and how much money's involved on the outcome, you'd wonder why there's any leniency at all. Because once you start, it's okay, half kilogram here, kilogram there, okay, 1.5. It's a problem.
Yeah, John, I think it's a lot to do, of course, is, you're talking about 54 kilos, half a leg for some of us.
Speak yourself.
They are fair dinkum. They are sticks, some of these jockeys. When you see them, they dehydrate themselves to make these weights. They're grey around the gills. It's not, some of them to keep riding, really do subject themselves to some harsh lifestyle choices to have a job. And with that, there is limited numbers. Like, see, the majority of jockeys went to Ballarat, and you had a second meeting at Tatura. There was also a meeting at Penhurst. You then have the interstate jockey. So, you've got a small pool of jockeys. You'll find a lot of the times apprentices. You'll see they can claim 3 kilos. You'll see a horse will have 52 or 54 kilos, and you'll think they're claiming 3 and 51. Unfortunately, their weight will be 52. So a lot of them can't take their claims in races. You could see today there was a couple of horses, Jet Stanley, of course, is 62. He's claiming 3. He's a jockey that's 5'11", John. He's a kid of about 17 who rides at about 52 kilos dripping wet. But, his expected lifespan in a jockey, he will put on another 5 kilos in the next couple of years, and will be having to take rides at 56. Mark Zara, the Melbourne Cup winner, can't ride under 56 kilos. There was only 4 or 5 horses he could have ridden in the Melbourne Cup. As it was the winner. So, so these jockeys to make these light weights, very, very hard.
All right, Gelding, what are your best bets for today?
Well, Professor, a very, very hard day. Kilmore Cup Day, races abandoned, so we can throw that form guide away. And that's what I like the couple there, but the 200,000 Kilmore Cup, so we'll give that a miss. So we go to Swan Hill, where it's a soft 7, Professor. Look, a very hard meeting. A lot of benchmark 58, 64 rating races, so the horses aren't, of great quality, but we'll go for a couple. Race 4, number 7, Let It Rip Reggie, trained by Henry Dwyer, ridden by Jack Hill. So hopefully that can do well for us. We'll then try race 5, number 9, There For You, trained by Dane Smith and ridden by Dean Yendall in the 1.5 mile race. And then we'll go race 6, horse number 6, Messina D, trained by Coffey and ridden by his son, Harry Coffey. So there's a couple for the listeners, Professor, but I will put a caveat on it to say that it's not a meeting that I will be investing in, Professor.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for your participation today. 2 more shows left for the year. So next week's the second last show for Sportsfan for the year, and then one after that, and then we'll have a bit of a break until next year. So until next Sunday, gentlemen, very good afternoon to you all.
You've earned a Bud Zero, Professor. Well done.